This is Body Talk, where we explore your inner universe. Welcome to Body Talk. I'm your host, David Lasondak, fascia specialist and structural integrator with the Center for Integrative Medicine at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And as my guest today, I am thrilled to have the former anatomy columnist of Yoga Journal, the co-founder of Tune Up Fitness, best-selling author of the book The Role Model, and the person who wants to democratize self-care, the one and only, the fabulous Jill Miller. Jill, welcome to the program.
Thank you, David. You know, I just heard for the first time just now that your name is pronounced Lasondak. I've been calling you Lazondak this whole time.
Wow, and I never corrected you. I must like you.
No, well, I mean, you're not necessarily at my table every night when I'm like, oh, David Lazondak said.
Yeah, well, that's a fairly common mispronunciation, so I'll let that one slide. I've heard far worse than that. I don't have an easy name like you.
Okay, fair enough.
So for those those of you out there in Radioland, Jill is a pioneer in what is sometimes called self-myofascial release, self-care, but you've always preferred the term self-massage.
Yeah, I don't think I ever heard the term self-myofascial release when I was originally rolling around on balls and wooden rollers. I studied massage I started studying massage when I was 18 years old. I started studying shiatsu. And so my original massage form was the Chinese medical model, or actually the Japanese medical model, because shiatsu is from the Japanese meridian theory. We have Chinese meridian theory, Thai meridian theory, Ayurvedic meridian theory, so many meridians. It's incredible. Fascial meridian theory. So I don't think I heard the term self-myofascial release till probably years later when I was in some other massage clinic or this or that.
Yeah, to me, that's relatively, say, the last 4 or 5 years, maybe, almost like a marketing tool.
Well, based on the research I did for your book,
It's our book. Come on.
the first 1990 was the first time the term was used in actual research. And so I started studying massage. Oh, good. I'm dating myself. I started studying shiatsu in 1990. You guys can run the math on that.
Yeah.
Figure out how old I am. But I guess basically
that means we know a lot.
That's right. We are subject matter experts.
Yes.
I started studying shiatsu massage probably in 1990, which is when that first study came out.
What inspired you to take the
To
move
study.
from, to take the move from, okay, I'm learning how to do this to other people, but there's a way that you can do it to yourself. Where did you make that leap?
Well, I think I actually was having self-massage for myself before I did formal studies. When I was in high school, I started studying yoga. Actually, junior high school, I started studying yoga from videotapes and from
Wow.
Yoga Journal magazine.
Yoga
Yeah,
Journal it was like mimeographed back then.
pretty much. Yeah, stapled,
Right.
sent from a
Came
white
in the
envelope from
mail,
the
for God's
publisher.
sakes. Yeah.
It did. It was so cool. Yeah, there was no ebooks back then. I started studying yoga around age 12ish, 13, 11, somewhere around that time.
Wow.
I grew up in a solar home off the grid in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And
Wow.
we didn't have cable because there's no cable when you're that far off the grid. We had
So
a
you had to make your own
satellite
fun,
dish.
basically.
You had to pick your own fun. Yeah, we had a satellite dish, and it was a big one, not like these little direct TVs. I mean, it was like this huge, like looking for Martians thing.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why we had that. That was probably pretty expensive, but I think my stepdad really wanted some TV
Yeah, well.
and wanted to be off the grid. You know what I'm saying? So
You got to pull those signals down. It wasn't so easy back. This was like what, the 80s probably? 70s?
late 70s.
Okay, there you go.
Late 70s, early 80s. So
I remember we
my
got
mother,
cable. It was a big deal.
that's right. My mom brought home, though we did have a Betamax, and my mom brought
Whoa.
home the Jane Fonda workout and the Raquel Welch yoga video. And so hopefully some of your listeners
That's
are
great.
of an age that they remember the seminal Jane Fonda workout. And
Mhm.
Raquel Welch's video was called True Beauty with Raquel Welch.
Oh
But
my.
what it was Bikram's first series. And of course,
What?
he
Get
later
out.
sued her. So my first exposure to yoga was Bikram's series via Raquel Welch in the bathing suit with these really hot, sweaty, backup yogis behind her. But I loved it. I was addicted. And I
Mhm.
mean, when I say I was addicted, I was addicted. I would race home after school every day and I would do these videos back to back. My mom gave up very quickly. She was not
Uh-huh.
into the video fitness like I was.
So this was like your Xbox, basically.
Yes, but it was an outlet. I was a very disembodied little girl and I was very overweight and I had very thick glasses and I was that girl in 6th grade who was teased and um, you know people would pass notes to me and say they wanted to be my boyfriend, but it was just people playing jokes on me. It was tough. And so when these videos came into my life, I guess sometime after 6th grade, early junior high, um, it was a revelation to get into my body. But it also spiraled along with an eating disorder. And so
Hmm.
now in retrospect, I can look back and I can see that what was really happening was I was trying to regulate myself because I really felt out of control. Lots of divorces in my families, lots of moves, still more divorces and moves to come. But that was really how I tried to anchor myself with these
Hmm.
practices.
Can you remember what it was like for you at that age, 11, 12 years old, experiencing that inner sensation of your body for the first time and going, whoa.
I'm an overachiever. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm an intense study. I really like to learn things and I will work very hard until I learn. I never thought of myself as a physical being. My sibling was excellent soccer
Mhm.
player, softball player, number one in state. Um, but I never considered myself a physical being
Mhm.
like she was.
Your body was just something that moved your brain around for you, basically.
That's right, and could play with my dolls or read.
Mhm.
I remember feeling the physical pain of disconnection, and I can just make a leap, just saying, just trying to touch my toes like they were on camera. Now if anybody knows me, like, you couldn't touch your toes at 12. I mean, didn't you literally dismember yourself doing yoga stretches? For photo shoots and whatnot.
Mhm.
Because I am hypermobile and I had no idea because I was just a stiff little,
Wow.
little studious kid. So when I first started stretching, it hurt. You feel that the delayed onset, you feel you don't have would ever have the ability to do these positions. And there was a questing and a conquesting, I think, of the aesthetic, that I saw on the pages of Yoga Journal or that I got from the video. But the discipline of practice, I mean, the discipline of practice of anything, of practicing scales, whether it's on a piano or on your body, does render accuracy and it improves your motor control and sensory inputs. And so over time, I really learned to also crave what I now know as the ecstatic experiences that my physiology gifted me with these practices. And the massage part came in because, it's still a common practice to give people, especially women, bath sets as gifts.
Yes.
Bath sets are just a really
My
popular
mother
thing.
loved those. My
Right.
Calgon, take me away.
Right. There's some bath salts and maybe there's some shampoo, a lotion, and then there's a wooden roller. There are all of these wooden foot rollers or something called a ma roller, which looks like a little wooden dumbbell that you would use to roll up and down your spine. It fits really nicely into the laminal groove, but it's hard wood. And that was my first massage tool. And I used that thing all the time. I just loved it. But I was a 14, 15-year-old gelatinous human. I wasn't 72-year-old
Mhm.
arthritic and
Yeah,
osteoporotic
and
woman
for
getting
those
over.
72-year-old arthritic people who might be listening, don't use them in
Don't
school. We'll talk about that here shortly.
a roller with your full body weight on it. Never. And so I really got into that. And then, there's so many junctions to the story, but
Mhm.
I did study massage. And then I also got formal training and informal training with my mentor, Glenn Black, who's been my lifelong mentor in all things bodywork, yoga, and meditation. Um, I started to need to, I loved the body work, but I couldn't get the kind of body work that I could get from him. And so I would use
Uh-huh,
tools
yes. Mhm.
to mimic the hands-on experience that I felt at the hands of my teacher or at the hands of other masters. And I started to really create a system around it, which now is called the role model, and it's branded and has
Yeah.
a collection of different
And,
soft rubber balls that we use.
this was going on in the background while your life was going in a very different direction from that at the time, right?
Yes, sir. It was.
Okay.
Because my intention all along with studying therapies was just to help my wounds, to help my spilkas, to help my
Mhm.
anxiety, to help my eating disorder, to help my
To
uh,
help
my
yourself.
my to help my
Yeah.
to help myself.
Yeah.
I was an
Treat yourself
actress.
like somebody you're responsible for helping.
That's right. I was an actress and I was a dancer. And so I consumed therapeutic modalities as a way to reset myself after performance. Especially mentally, I would do roles that would be so stressful psychologically. You
Oh,
needed
yeah.
something to come down after a show to be able to go to bed.
I know how it is when I'm teaching like a 6-hour day, a
Oh
7-hour
yeah.
day, and it's like, "Oh, there's a yoga class across the street, but you want me to meet for dinner after the class because I just need to do
Yeah,
something that just, like, reminds me that I'm not performing anymore."
that's right.
Because there's an aspect of teaching that's like performing. So when you have to put yourself in the headspace of a person who might be totally unlike you, that must be really weird to have to come out of that headspace and find Jill again.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I was when I quit acting, it was a great stress relief just to not have to imagine myself being chased or being raped or having to tend to huge problems that would come with a role. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
in order
Or
to,
being a zombie.
or well, I wasn't the zombie. I killed the
Oh,
zombies.
you killed the
So
zombie. I like
yes,
that even
I
better.
was the
So
heroine.
yes,
Yes,
yes, Jill has killed zombies, and you can find it on Amazon along with her book, The Role Model.
that's true. It's interesting, the marketplace, right? You could
It
you
is.
could
Why not?
find
Zombies are still hot these days. So so
uh
so so
yeah.
when did you start to make the switch? How long ago?
Um, the switch. Well, boy, nine
The be
eleven was the switch for
Huh.
me.
Wow.
Yeah. 9/11 happened, and that's 2001. I was already, studying yoga. I was in Los Angeles at the time. I was waitressing. The yoga studio where I was studying asked me if I would start teaching for them. I never really wanted to teach yoga. I was really dedicated to the art, but when 9/11 happened, I I think a lot of people in this country took inventory of what was I contributing to other people's lives, other people's well-being,
Mhm.
and where really, how was I making a difference every day? Acting and waitressing, I was not making a difference every day on the scale that I feel I was, as someone who wants to contribute to social justice and social change, um, and help people feel their way through their own body and their story and their healing process. Because I did think acting could be that, and I do think it is that but it's very hard to get to that scale, right? You have to
It is.
really.
I mean, we are a story-based, I wanna say culture, but it goes beyond culture. We love
Organism.
stories. Stories are how we understand and process our lives, and
Indeed.
I almost think we have too many stories right now. So we're losing. Okay, so we go back to the satellite dish here, but I'm gonna sound really old here. But, when we only had 3 networks and everybody talked about Johnny Carson the next morning, there was that shared collective
Yes.
cultural consciousness that now is so fragmented. But I don't know that I wanna quite get down that philosophical road here today. You mentioned being the change you want to see in the world, which if
Hmm.
we all did a little bit of that, we'd have it. So you talked about at this Australia Fascia Congress, and it really struck with me about the democratization of self-care. So beyond the bath and body works stuff, why don't you kind of explain for the listener what you mean by self-care?
Sure. Uh, I do want to jump onto your Johnny Carson thing first to let you know
Okay.
that
Sure.
Johnny was a wonderful person, and I got to know him just a little bit because
Oh my
when
God.
I waited tables, he was a customer of mine at least once a week. I
Uh-huh.
used to wait tables at Arnold Schwarzenegger's restaurant in Santa Monica because I spoke German and I knew I could get a
Yeah.
job someplace where.
Wow.
Yes. Anyways, I
You
just had
you
to
keep
say,
going up
oh,
the awesome chart here. Yeah.
so I started teaching. I just started teaching yoga full time. I quit acting. I stopped auditioning. I told my agent, don't send me out anymore. And that was it. I just started to go in a different direction and managed very quickly to establish privates. So I went into to do, which if you don't know what privates are, some people may not know, but
Okay.
some people want just one-on-one yoga. And for me, now in 2020, what that has evolved into is I'm actually a yoga therapist. I'm a credentialed yoga therapist, which is it's
Mhm.
different than just teaching yoga.
It is. I worked with a really excellent yoga therapist on a lot of chronic pain patients, and I felt like we had this chess match where they would leave my treatment room, and then a week later they'd come back having seen her, and it'd be like, "Oh, that was an interesting move you made. Here's my next move." And it was wonderful.
Yeah, and you could progress across the
Yeah.
board.
Oh, I felt like we hypercharged each other's practices and accelerated the benefits for the patients like nothing I've seen before or since.
That's so wonderful. Yeah, so I started to get really interested in chronic pain specifically, especially as I was teaching, because what I would see when I was teaching is I would see people avoiding certain movements, or I was wondering why
Mm.
I would demonstrate a movement and then people would copy the movement and it wouldn't look anything like what I was asking for. They were using other muscles to perform joint movements. And so what started to happen is I ended up getting into very regressive work and getting
Re
into
regressive?
regressive. So
What do you mean by that?
like, okay, let's just, for example, back when I was teaching flow type of yoga, because originally when I took over for teaching at the studio, it was a flow type of class,
Mhm.
which was not my background. My background was in what my teacher Glenn Black taught, which was very Iyengar based, but it was also very body body work remedial exercise based. So
Okay.
we would do joint by joint movements, articulating every joint of the body in just chronically, like we would analyze every single joint of the body in all the different ranges it went to, both passively and actively, and do very playful movements and conjure up very unique and novel movements based on uh, the language of the body, which is articulations. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
So joints articulate. So we would really practice a lot of joint articulations. This is before, by the way, way before joint articulations has become one of the hottest type of training known. I'm not going to name it right now, but joint articulations is a very hot thing. But guess what? Dancers and yogis have been doing it for generations
It's
and
amazing when you
generations.
put a new name on something, how suddenly it's like, "Oh, we didn't know that existed. Thank you for
I
telling
know,
us."
it's so weird. There's nothing new. It's just packaging. So I would regress movements because I would see that people were avoiding or bypassing or flinching when I would ask for certain ranges.
Mhm.
And then it became even more regress, like, you know what? And this is what Glenn would do in class. We need to actually massage this. We need to
Yeah.
do a little bit of local treatment because either you're not proprioceiving, you're not, their proprioception of that is not there, or there really isn't the motor ability to execute the movement. And so let's just regress until we find a way for you to tailor your own body for the intention behind this movement or behind this pose. And so I ended up coming up with a system called Yoga Tune-Up, which really was about disassembling poses, reassembling your own body, being able to find your body's blind spots, areas of overuse, underuse, misuse, or body confusion, which really highlights that proprioception, interoception thing, and then move into the performance. So it was
Yeah,
really
let's
curious
break
about
it
where
down
these,
to its basic elements,
yeah, looking for these blind spots.
and then
And
we'll
then
put it together into this big elaborate
yeah,
pose or sequence.
but in what I teach in Yoga Tune-Up, the process is the pose. The most important part of it is that you are present with the process. And the end pose or the end movement is never the goal. It's that
Mhm.
each step along the way, you're in discovery mode. And that really is the win. Because if you apply that discovery mode and that curiosity and that embodied curiosity to everything you do, then overall you can really impact your overall movement patterns. And then that owie thing that's constantly impacting you, it might just disappear because you're identifying where you're going blind or unconscious or numb in your daily life.
So to make a corollary here, would you say that when people have sports or exercise related injuries, it's because they're allowing themselves to be distracted and not present with what they're feeling in their body? They're just like, okay, I got to do so many reps, or they have this performance goal in mind, as opposed to a inner exploration mindset.
I think both can coexist. I think that, you know, when you're
Okay.
in the midst of performance, you do have to let go and be just in the flow of the goal and in the play. But I think practice is something different. And so I really
Mm,
excite people to commit to the practice of practicing and not mindlessly go through. And I think
yes.
there's some evidence based on this that, right, really connecting your attention to inputs as well as to outputs improves embodied cognition and all that sort of good stuff.
Okay.
And I
So
apply this to rolling. So
you probably,
this
yeah.
gets you on the background. The reason balls got brought in,
Yes, because you
and
don't use rollers, correct?
no, those are
Okay.
big.
Yeah,
How do
and they're
you
hard to
carry
carry
them on
around,
an
and
airplane?
yeah,
They're hard to fit behind your car seat.
they are. Why did you move to balls?
Balls, you know, that's such a good question. I had never thought like, well, why just balls? Why, what happened?
Yeah,
I think I had probably tennis balls hanging around
sure.
at some point, but I discovered through a dance teacher that I was working with a product called the Pinky Ball. And she would use the Pinky Ball before we would dance. And so I just started to implement, you know, I discovered rubber, let's say. I
Yeah.
got away from
Yeah,
sport
no,
balls
I
and I
remember Pinky
discovered
Balls. I
rubber.
remember Pinky Balls. It was a specific brand,
Right.
of ball. Yeah, it was a little squishy, but it had some bounce.
That's right. And so I started to bring them into my classroom. I wasn't a massage teacher, but what I
Yeah,
could do is
let's not.
direct people to massage themselves so that they could awaken these specific body parts that
Mhm.
I knew were problematic. And I'll tell you, you know, the spine, the shoulder, what part isn't problematic because of of our sitting culture. What I did first was I did that with my private students. The
Mhm.
bigger thing that I did with my students en masse was I did gut massage. So really the first group massage I did was part of my own healing from my eating disorder. So this goes way back to the beginning.
I
Part of
was
my
gonna say that's a very bold place to start
I
doing
know.
work
I
on the
got balls.
belly, and the
I'm
people are bellies are very personal spaces, and people feel very, I think, less comfortable with their bellies, across the board than they
David,
do, say, their elbow.
I have learned so much in the last 20 20 something years of doing this. I mean, the way I practice and teach now is radically different than, you know, this 29-year-old saying, okay, everybody, now roll up this hand towel, put it right here on your belly button and lay face down. Which is, I had adapted. Originally, I would do
Mhm.
this with there was a tool in the Iyengar space. It looked like a hamburger bun filled with sand. And I had confessed to my
Oh, yes, I
teacher
remember those. Yeah,
I had
yeah.
confessed to my teacher that I was bulimic, and that I had trouble feeling my abs. Like I couldn't feel my muscles contract. I was in Pilates as part of the dance program, and my roommate, who was pre-med, she came and took the Pilates classes, and she was always sore, always complaining about her abdomen sore. And I was like, I was never sore. And it's because I was completely bypassing my abs.
Mm.
And that was really my emotional workaround with
Wow.
that. It
Wow.
was part of my eating
And you weren't
disorder.
aware that you were doing it either, if I'm hearing you right. You
No, I
bypassed them,
couldn't.
but
I just couldn't access it.
yeah,
Because I was using my limbs to get to my core, right? Which is what a lot of people do.
sure.
You do abs and your hip flexors are sore. Why? Because you're using your hip instead of your
Right.
core
Mhm.
to strengthen your core. And that's a whole other conversation we can
That's
have about.
another podcast. That's another
Yes.
podcast.
But so she told me to lay down face down on this bean bag on my abdomen, and I felt my viscera. I felt my pain. I felt my emotions. I felt everything I
Mm.
had been bypassing and running from for the last, decade. And
Wow.
that really brought me face to face with my inner issues. And that is how I began to finally nurture, slow down, learn to listen, and give voice to what I had been running from for so long. I came up with this workshop concept called core integration, a total abdominal awakening. There's many other parts of the story, but really, if you want to say, how did you start teaching people this democratized self care? So I bought all these hand towels at Target. I still have them. This original hand, like they're blue
It's
and
going in the Joe
green.
Miller archive for the
Yeah.
Somatosensory Museum that we're planning to open in 2030. Uh,
Yeah, well, that's what I used to do. I would roll up a hand towel in my dorm room, and then I would shape it like a honey bun. I'm from the
mhm,
South, so in the South, there's this delicious thing called a honey bun. It's like a giant cinnamon roll, and so I'd roll up the towel and then
mhm.
make it into a spiral, and then I'd lay on it, and I would move it into different places in my abdomen every morning as a substitute for that sandbag thing. And then eventually, I discovered a really pliable rubber ball, but I didn't know how to get them. I didn't know how to get those into that studio. I used the towel thing, but
Yeah,
then I
but that's one
quickly.
of the things I like about you, Joe, is having watched your videos online, having worked with some of those. Is yes, you have your particular balls and tools that are expressly made for this purpose, but you always have a workaround in case the person doesn't have access to that. And
Yeah,
it's a
well,
good workaround, and that is beautiful. You're trying to sell more than just a product, and
I
that's
am.
so refreshing. 2020.
Application should be known by everyone. Access to yourself. You are not a subdivision of different medical experts. You can heal yourself and you can feel yourself. But sometimes those locking keys have been thrown away or hidden, compartmentalized due to medical trauma, by misdiagnosis, or by belief that the diagnosis is you and your identity. And so part of my mission is to democratize self-care. And I don't mean about polishing your nails or, getting a facial, although a fascia facial is a good thing. But really what I mean is you having access to your own self-treatment. And so the education for me is really what motivates me. And of course I have tools that support that education. But in a pandemic like we're in, I'm talking to people all over the world who don't have access to the therapy balls, or they need help right now. And there are things in your house right now that you can literally massage to help and support and to do these practices.
Now, the thing that's important here, though, and we alighted to that earlier about being 72 and using a wooden dowel roller, or your what are those things used for dough that you roll things? A roller,
A rolling pin.
a rolling pin.
A
Thank you, a
rolling
rolling
pin.
pin. Don't
Yes.
use a rolling pin. Don't use a golf ball.
Mm.
Can't negotiate with a golf ball, and that's really important because you uncovered a really interesting story, or I should say, case study about somebody who actually damaged themselves internally overdoing abdominal work.
There's now two documented case studies of really severe injuries doing self massage. One was using a very hard compressed foam ball, and this ball is actually harder than a lacrosse ball. And the woman damaged her tibial nerve. It's a division of the sciatic nerve. She was rolling her glute. She had glute pain, and she was rolling. And she was in her early 50s. I think she was 51 or 52. And it was something that they had never seen in the ER. It's the first documented case, and this was I think it was the end of or mid 2019. And this other notable case that really pained me, I think I might have cried when I read it, was a man who's 68 with chronic constipation, and it was his own
Mm,
hand. He used his own hand and digging into the left side of his abdomen, doing abdominal self massage on his descending colon. He tore a part of his mesentery. So this is such a severe personal. He could have died,
yeah.
and just get the chills thinking about it. But your fist is actually quite hard, especially if your intent is very hard. Part of
Yeah.
our your hand can be the most delicate thing in the world, or it can destroy. You can kill somebody with a fist. So it really is about that intent. And he must have been in so much discomfort, but the
Yeah.
chronicity, and also he had very weak tissue. I believe he
Sure. It
had
would have to be.
been a cancer survivor or something like that.
But I mean, you've seen people like this. I've seen people like this where, well, that's okay. I can take it. I can put up with it. If that's what it's going to take to fix this, then I can do it. And we really want to back off from those spaces. It's such a strange thing to quantify. It doesn't feel good. It's not pain. It's somewhere in between, and it feels necessary. How do you explain
Mm,
that to other people? That Goldilocks point. Not too hard, not
yeah,
too soft, but just right.
the therapeutic touch. It's
Yeah,
so subjective. I have a very strong bias about soft tools because when I roll on something hard, it hurts. It makes my
yeah.
body reject it. It makes my body tense up.
And,
And
you
if
know,
I can't get
conversely,
my
when I was taught in the way I teach, people who learn myofascial hands-on techniques is I say, "Use a conforming hand." I
yes.
want you to conform your hand to the texture of the surface of the person you're treating, which I think speaks to having softer tools, softer hands. You can be more sensitive that way.
Yes, to conform to your form rather than to be at war with your form. Neurologically, we have this thing called the muscle bracing response, which is our body's incredible way of shielding itself from being dented or hurt or harmed. And that neurological tension is a very strong sympathetic response. And so, if you have muscle bracing happening spontaneously all over your body when a tool is applied to it, it's going to you're going to be more in a revved up, amplified, accelerated state. And really, in order for therapeutic touch to be able to mobilize your fascias, your muscles, work on adhesions or range of motion, you really have to work with compliant tissue and a downregulated or a deeply relaxed nervous system. So being able to really figure out what your stress level, or really what is that baseline stress level as your body relates to a tool, is really important. And softer tools just spontaneously seem to disarm that muscle bracing response because they're just more tender. It's a more tender touch thing, so the body doesn't sense it as threat.
And
And
you're
but
going
this is
into a sensitive area, so that sense threatening mechanism is gonna be much more alert.
That's right. And I mean, your body is so interesting, and there's so many different ponds of connective tissue, and then abundance of defense mechanisms versus not. I mean, your upper traps have tons of muscle spindles
Mhm.
compared to some places in your.
Your glutes actually don't have that many spindles per gram. It's like 8 spindles per gram.
Maybe that's why she just kept going and going. She thought maybe if she rubbed her butt more with the little feedback that she was getting. But also, going beyond the spindle, because that's easy to talk about. That's
Mhm.
because it's well researched.
Yes,
But
yes.
there's so many other free nerve endings that there's no measurements yet. We have no idea what all of the different nerve endings are conveying necessarily to our brain, but we
Yeah.
do know that some of them are traveling into that the pain and emotional centers of the brain. Others are traveling to your sensory mapping centers of the brain. So we have all sorts of crossover. But and what touch is the right touch, or what tool is the right tool for
Mhm.
different parts of your body, and what is the right amount of pressure? I
So
would
so so
say that you're. Go ahead.
yeah, so if somebody is listening right now and is thinking, "I really wanna do this, but I'm a little scared. I don't wanna hurt myself," what would your advice be?
Well, start at the periphery. Don't start in your abdomen. One of the things I've
Don't do what
learned
you did 20
in
years ago.
the decades of teaching is I actually frequently do start people in their core. But this
Mhm,
is that would be like an application podcast where we talk about like where's the best place to start, because
mhm.
I do think that you want to immediately address central nervous system vis-a-vis position and breath, because if you can attune your respiratory rate, and you can get into more of a parasympathetic, a relaxation response, then any of the rolling applications, they're actually going to be less uncomfortable because you've already lessened your threat response. Where you want to start is hands and feet, because that is the least threatening to
Okay.
the body in general. And feet's fabulous because you especially, like, my mom, she's got a huge bunion. She had a bunionectomy on the other foot. And so I have her hold on to a chair, or she can even sit in a chair, and then she can roll light pressure, put her foot on top of the ball, and just start to build sensitization. So that's the other thing, is we want to familiarize ourselves with what it even feels like on our skin. What does it feel like to compress into a little bit more of the fatty layer? And then what does it feel like to start to get gliding, to start to shear? All of these things are novel stimuli. And sometimes novel stimuli feels surprising and interesting. Other times, because it's novel, it hurts. And so we just really have to build up a threshold, a capacity for this novel touch. And but your body will start to, it'll wake up. It's been looking for sensation your whole life. That's part of what our our peripheral nervous system does. It's like, give me something to focus on. And so if you give it really cool stimuli and novel stimuli,
Mhm.
you start to pattern yourself better, and you also start to get better coordination and motor control. And that coordination thing is so important, especially as we age with slip and falls. And uh,
I wanted to talk about that because I used to work with a physical medicine and rehabilitation doctor, and he used to complain that the only thing walkers were good for is making you walk like an elderly person. There's a huge number of slips and falls and deaths that could have been avoided because of slips and falls. And what we tend to do in our rehab is we encourage the person to be more reliant on their arms and their wrists and grabbing and handholds to get around.
mm,
And then my theory, and it can be your theory, is that we actually lose touch with the ground beneath our feet and we shuffle. We don't roll through the ankle. And the ankle, it's designed to give our body constant sensory information about the ground beneath our feet. But if we're not actively using that ankle, we're not going to get that information.
oh my goodness, yes. And then the type of footwear that is put on foot bones around ankles, those little ankle boots that limit the triplanar activity in the ankle, the feet back
Oh,
literally
nice.
is
Feedback. Love it.
becomes less and less and less.
Trademark
And
that,
then
Jill.
I have all sorts of, no, it's not
Jill has the
trademark.
best names for things. So
I do.
she does. She does. And somebody who loves language, man, you just every time.
Don't make me say proprioception on your podcast, okay?
Oh, slain. So, yes, increase your proprioception, get
Well,
your
this
feet
is
back.
my friend Katie Bowman and I literally today we launching our pre-sale of our program called Walking Well, a stepwise approach to an everyday movement, and where we disassemble the walking body from the ground up. And I teach 25-minute rollouts for every body part, and she teaches 25-minute biomechanic explorations of these micro movements. And really, this is all about repatterning your walk and giving you a way to self-assess. But the feet, we could have spent 6 hours alone on the feet. The program is 6 hours.
I would have signed up for that. I totally would have signed up for
Well,
that.
you can get it. I mean, I'm totally selling right now. Like
Yeah,
I
and I
have
gotta
to
be
mention
honest,
it
this
because
is a surprise to me. We did not talk about this beforehand.
mm-mm.
So
No, I'm just so, I see my mother and I see my
yeah.
father. I see both of them having fascial challenges and biomechanical challenges, and they are still new to this world. I mean, my father, he's a infectious disease doctor. He's so proud of me that I'm in this medical book now. Um, and he's been suffering himself from muscle wasting and I think a neurovascular impingement.
Wow.
And I'm trying to explain to him the fascial relationship to all of this because it's not his beat. And also I am so lucky to know people my dad's age who have been in the
Yeah.
fascist space. But the silos in medicine has
Mhm.
kept doctors blind to advances in that have happened since when they were in medical schools.
But I always tell my older population, besides giving them ball work to do on the feet, I also tell them before they even get out of bed, and I lifted this from one of my favorite yoga teachers. It couldn't be more simple. Is just to rock back and forth with your ankles before you ever get out of bed. Press on the gas, press on the brake, press on the gas, press on the brake. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, and wake those ankle joints up before you ever put your feet on the ground in the morning.
Yeah, I do ankle work every single day. It's so important to me, especially because I think it's like a third of the population by the time you're 29 has sprained an ankle. And so we lose some of the mechanoreception or the feedback from the ankle back
Mhm.
from the ankles.
Mhm. You're working
And
all the ankles, Joe.
I
Got
got
one in. I
that
got one
was so good. Oh my gosh, I'm totally going to use that in
Please
a
do.
future podcast about the
Please
Walking
do.
Well program. But yes, I mean, I still get really excited when I think about the new research that Stecco's lab and that Carla Stecco did on the retinaculum, and the fact that the ankle retinaculum has the most per capita fasciocytes of all fascial tissues in the body, and that is that the ankle is able to produce more of the slick, more hyaluronan than any other part, and that is because we think, or I think, because the
Mhm.
ankle must have so much differential movement at all times to negotiate forces coming from the ground up into it and your own body weight smushing back down upon it, and being able to, without you even thinking, your body knowing how to direct your next footfall, your next swing to heel strike. So
Right.
your ankle is such God could not have created something more fine.
And I'm curious to see if we find similarities in the knee retinacula and the wrist retinacula. That there is some that's part of the whole proprioceptive system. Where are we? Where do we need to feel the most in order to feel the most? Oh, that could have come out better. It was better in
Yeah,
my
it
head.
makes sense to
Better in
me.
my
What do
head.
we need to feel the most in order to feel the most?
You're
Yeah,
right.
well, the hands just don't have the kind of load
No, no, but
that
they have to do a lot of
they have a lot of
fine
reps, right? The
skills.
type of reps that they have
Yeah.
with soft or well, not soft. I mean,
Mhm. Well,
I know
if
wood chop
you're hitting
wood,
with a
but when
hammer
I
or you're
right,
painting with a
exactly,
paintbrush, those are 2 very different things. So you
exactly.
need to be able to fine tune that, just like if you're stepping on gravel, if you're stepping on clay, if you're climbing a mountain versus, walking on a beach.
Yes, but the barefoot facts are that most people are clonking around in many layers of foam
Well, they're not
on
thinking
their
on their
feet.
feet, are they?
Stop it. Many layers of foam and rubber that are not
Mhm.
transferring forces
Mm,
into their sensory system, but they're keeping them afoot, keeping them upright, but not necessarily building sensitivity. They're
yeah.
they're they're numbing themselves, as Tom Myers calls them, foot caskets, I believe, or foot coffins.
Yes, yes, coffins for your feet. That said, we are coming up on our time for today. Is there anything else you want to get in before we sign off today, Joe?
Yeah, I would really encourage people to find a way to tool around every surface of their body as a practice of discovery. And you might will have surprising self-treatment results just from an exploration, head to toe, face to foot. Use the use what you have at your house. Use couch ends. Use corners.
Hmm.
Use your kids' balls. It doesn't need to hurt to work. Less can be way more. You have so much more sensitivity in the superficial layers of your periphery than you do in the deep anyway. Think of a rolling practice really as improving your embodiment and your self-knowing.
And with that, thank you very much for being here today, Joe Miller.
Thanks, David.
This is David Lasondak. Thank you for listening to Body Talk. If you enjoyed what you heard, please hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to become a sponsor of the show, go to patreon.com/bodytalkradio. This is David Lasondak saying, remember, it's all connected. See you next week.